You thought I was dead or you didn't think of me at all, but that was only in spirit. I'm alive and we're starting up again. This time, hyper-focused on writing advice. It's become abundantly clear to me that writing advice and the mechanisms of writing, specifically what not only that I'm interested in, but also what other people are interested in as well. Link below to the writing forum where I've given feedback for 3 years now. We're going to be approaching the same kind of works on this program, but we're going to do it with a hyper-specific intensity of actionable feedback and what you need as a writer to take away from these works. Because for the most part, what we're talking about here aren't things that you are going to want to read. So the question is like, yeah, well, what's in it for you? And the answer to that is now, I will A, tell the story in a succinct and hopefully enlightening way, and B, we will really get into the nuts and bolts of how you construct these stories, what went wrong, and hopefully what went right. So today we're starting off with Dots by R.D. Berger, which I kind of did before, years ago. Any reference to previous work on YouTube will have to just be appended with a few years ago. So we're just going to ignore the time frame here, but it was part of a collection of works that I shotgunned off reading through, and it had an issue on the very couple of paragraphs where I immediately passed over, and coming back to it in editing when I had to pull segments, hands down here don't work well. When I had to pull segments, I realized it was actually a very well-written prologue. And that's the first interesting thing I think we're going to talk about here is the alpha reader. But first, let's just talk about the general plot of the prologue, which I think, once again, is excellent. It's a woman's on a ship leaving Japan, and death is following her. It's interesting because it's a synthesis of two kinds of deaths. It's a literal death. There is a man corporating, being the body of death itself, but he kills in a sort of final destination abstract way, which those two things together work really well here. And that's what creativity is like the synthesis of ideas. So, and not only that, generally well written too. This prologue is better just on pure entertainment than many professional novels I've seen. But the alpha reader issue. So the actual sentence, the main character is referencing their staff of Mizu Shobai girls. Once again, it's Japanese, which my immediate reaction to reading it through the first time without a second thought was, when actually it was a staff as in like a wait staff or a staff of employees, and apparently, once you Google it, Mizu Shobai is the thing. I'm going to preface this that on alpha readers and just how you read it on the first off, this is going to be my opinion rather than any sort of fact or weighting. I'm way less stressful about it than other writers are. I've had plenty of people in a writing group who are, the second someone reads it the wrong way, they're like, okay, it's got to be changed. But on the counterpoint to that, reading through a lot of better works, you very, very rarely end up in a situation where, you know, you're confused, you read it the wrong way. It happens even in professionally edited works, but it doesn't happen a lot. So especially if you are a newer writer or someone, you know, just self-publishing or something, if you're in a situation that someone has read your work wrong, you're probably going to want to change it and communicate that sentence, that meaning in a different way. Because here's the hard truth. You don't have street cred, man. For whatever the writer equivalent of street cred, you don't have ink on your shoes. There you go. Seasoned writers have ink on their, I don't know what I'm saying. Nary a reader. Many? What is nary? Nary doesn't make sense there. Many a reader will read very short amounts of your work to see if they want to read it or not. You're not a trusted name. So as clean and as communicative as possible. But otherwise, it's a 10 out of 10 prologue. Now, let's jump to the first chapter where the story actually starts, because that's what prologues are. Prologues are short stories that you tell disconnected from the main story that might give some additional context, but generally be read without. So the first chapter follows Hank, who's working in a cafe looking after a girl that he really wants to take out on a date, talk to, etc., which is, it's a fine start. You want your character to want things that they don't have. The second thing he wants is superpowers. In this world, there are geniuses who have some sort of superpower. It's not explained well, and it's not going to be explained well, spoiler. And then there's dots who take the test and fail, and then they get a dot on their head, and they're normal but worse? Question mark? There's going to be question marks as I'm trying to explain this to you. And so the second half of the chapter, he goes and takes the test, and it's sort of like dreamlike. And there's 2 points we need to talk about here, because tests in the first chapter are a really normal thing. I've seen it a lot. I've seen it in all kinds of works a lot, and it can be good or bad. There's two things. There's two elements when you're writing a test, at least two standard elements. You can always deviate and surprise, but there's two standard elements you're looking at here. One, which is actually less important, believe it or not, is the test itself. What does the test communicate about your world? What is the push and pull of the test? Because your readers like to play along. So if you present them a puzzle, if you present them a situation where you ask, what would you do in this situation? Readers are going to be highly engaged. So I have two books we're going to reference regarding that. A, The Poppy War. The very first chapter, it's just a normal test. It's a written school exam. But the entire context of that first chapter is the lengths the character will go to pass that test, and it is glorious. In terms of first chapters across any book, this is one of the best ones of all time as far as I'm concerned. She's sadomasochistic. It's either she gets to go to the academy or she has to marry an old fat man. So you understand it, and it also sets the tone for the book. This other one, which is not a first chapter, but also just the first one that came to my head just now when thinking about what does an interesting test look like, is Speaker for the Dead. The sort of antagonist is this little girl, and she has to take a test to figure out if she's special and has the right, I don't know, if genetic makeup to lead. I'm gonna spoil it, but it's just a matter of discovery as you're trying to figure out A, what's she doing, and B, what would you do in this situation? Because she's trying to like fake like a genetic disorder. She's trying to like force it, doing several things. It's that joy of discovery. Tests are either puzzles or they're windows into the soul of the character, or ideally both. Dots, it's definitely not the second one. There's nothing interesting about the test. It's not explained. There's no clear parameters of what they're even trying to do, but the writer has the right idea in that the character interacts with the test in an interesting way. He chooses to fail it, or at least he chooses to leave. Once again, language is unclear here, which is an interesting idea because you start your chapter presenting off that he wants this thing, and then he chooses not to take that thing. That character arc in a single chapter is a great hook for your book. The issue here, and why this is only a half-baked chapter, is that I don't understand it as the reader. If your character is going to make a new choice and change the direction of their lives, you have to explain why they have made that turn. There's literally in structure, it's the turn. There's a turn. There's a river and there's a turn. One of those is not novel parlance and you can disregard. Chapter 2, he meets an anime dog. What does that mean? I don't know. It's a weird description. It immediately makes me think of Alita, Battle Angel by Robert Rodriguez, which is probably not a movie you even remember. That weird sort of otherworldly, like, is it big eyes? I don't know. And this is an aside. This is an aside for Alita. I remember when that movie came out, people were like critiquing like the style of it, just because it looks weird. But I never had a problem with it until I saw the movie, because in the movie, spoilers if you care about that at all, in the movie, it's people from the moon or Mars. It was from another planet that specifically looked like anime characters. So in the context of the literal world, she didn't even look human, which no one reacted like that. It doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. And in the context of learning what we can do with this chapter, I think anime is a fine enough start to your funnel of description, but then you have to go and describe the specific parts that typify what you view as anime, especially for a word that literally no one I have ever talked to has been able to describe. What is anime? Everything is anime if you don't have self-esteem, ability to take criticism and people not liking what you like. Hot take. The only other thing we get from chapter 2, which is just, this is where we nosedive here in quality. Our main character, Hank, is mopey and lamenting his inability to find a girlfriend. But here's the thing. Here's where chapter 1 fails yet again. He never tried to ask her out or make any advances, so he just seems like a creepy like neckbeard here who just like stalking women. He's just like, man, I'm never gonna talk with them, but I just wish they would date me. It's like, there's zero sympathy there. I'm gonna give you a very important definition right now for melodrama. The only difference between well-written drama and melodrama is how well it's earned. Melodrama is just drama that's unearned. It's just a catch-all. If I say melodrama, it just means what you went for sucked. And it sucks. It's not endearing the character at all, which is a shame, because if it was earned, him striking out. If the chapter started with him asking a girl out and failing, then you would understand this sort of pent-up anger or loneliness, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it's nothing. It's a pity party that the audience was not invited to. Chapter 3 takes place at the house the dog brings him to. There's a man there. There's a woman who becomes his sort of pseudo love interest, and once again, in an incredibly creepy way, he objectifies her. It's the ages are incredibly unclear. I think he's hitting on a much older woman. All we really know is she's younger than the other man. But and this is also important because let's just say I didn't take good notes and that they're actually the same age. There's the information that the writer literally communicates. This character is that age. That character is like, it applies to anything. We're talking about ages here. But there's also what just the language and the narrative forces upon us, the framing of it. And that let's just assume for a second that they're the same age. This doesn't read like that at all. It reads like him being weird towards an older woman that he's just objectifying. All problem, all bad there. And then the other half of all this is the story with the other man who runs the house. And that now that Hank has failed the test, he's a dot, which means he has no powers, even though he chose not to, so I'm not really clear there, and apparently he did it twice. I'm very unclear how the entire power system works, and that's the big takeaway, in that I have no idea what anyone's talking about. It's literally 3 through 10 of people sitting around this house talking mostly about a vague power system with some vague character dynamics within it. And there's 2 ways you can do powers. Powers go from soft to hard, both in terms of execution and introduction. You can do a Brandon Sanderson where like literally every mechanic is explained. We fully understand every parameters. Or it just has to vaguely make sense to your audience intuitively. No one has ever questioned why Gandalf can do magic. Obviously he's Gandalf, he can. I have literally no idea what the superpower system is here. There's geniuses, and then there's the dots who failed the test, but also apparently in this one case chose not to pass the test, which that doesn't make sense to me. But then Harold? But then the man in the house who runs the house, Milton, he's also a dot, and he tells us that dots are geniuses. Dots are actually even more powerful than the superpowered people. What does that mean? Screw you. That's what that means. I'm not explaining. and this is just the frustration here of just we're trapped in a house. We're having conversations with Milton. We're having conversations with Rio, and it's just on and on and on and on and on. And I have very few notes. We could get into the specifics of on a chapter to chapter basis what you're trying to accomplish with a chapter. A chapter is a discrete unit. Every single chapter should be its own idea. You could almost view it as a short story. But there's nothing. There's nothing there. And it feels like almost like that point of the story where the character has to train and learn their powers. But A, there's no training. B, there's not even a lot of exposition. And C, even if you are going for those things, there's better things to do with that. One thing I immediately think of is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, in that the first act happens, then there's a time jump because the character has gone to a house, a manor, to learn how their powers work and how to be a lady and fine dine, it's delightful. Or just looking at something like more accessible that everyone knows about. Let's look at the original Star Wars movie. There's 2 scenes of the powers in the original Star Wars movie. He talks to Obi-Wan in his house, and then they train later on. And you know what happens in between those scenes? Plot. Characters want things, and then they do things to make those things happen, and then they have setbacks. Luke doesn't want to leave. Luke wants to go find his aunt alive. Luke wants to get away from the Empire. They need a ship. They need all these different things. Everything would be a chapter, each one of these needs. And then you intersperse those. My spider interspersers. You intersperse them with the exposition and the power system. The only point of note in here that we're going to cover before ending is chapter 8 seems to have the greater plot, in that we have a vague sense of the sort of death character, and there's some evil entity, not a corporation, but like a group or evil powers, and they are, and I quote, in conflict in Africa, Central Asia, the Middle East, and Israel. Israel and the Middle East are distinct entities here. And not only that, but it seems to be that Polynesia, Micronesia, the Pacific Islands are apparently Central Asia, so we're having some geography problems. But I'm not here to nitpick. I have fun every once in a while when it just really just gives me a chuckle. But that's the idea I want to end on. As a writer, as a creative type who has to put stuff out there, there is a need to have the details straight in your head and build up these details. But at the same time, the details are going to matter more to you than the reader. And there's like this cult of, I don't want to say intellectualism. That makes me sound like a populist prick here. But there's what gets all the views, what gets all the likes, what gets all the like the gut punch to your like, yeah, that's a good point, are the nitpickers who look at specific points. And it's a juvenile thing to do. When I was a kid, I would watch Cinnamon Toast Sins. I would watch Cinnamon Toast Sins and say, that was a good point. But then my brain developed and I said, wait a second, every single thing they've ever said is stupid. As a writer, give yourself the leeway to make tiny detail mistakes. Build the world you want to build, fill it with details. But for the reader, what the reader is going to glomp onto at the end of the day is the actual story and the characters and the plot. The world building is salt, right? It makes it taste good, but you can bake a spicy lasagna without the salt. You know, people might notice a little bit at the end of the day, but if you forget to put the tomatoes in, it doesn't matter how much salt you have. If anything, the salt might make it worse without the tomatoes. I don't know why lasagna, but so let's just give the specific advice for this piece. The one thing Hank has going for him is his need for women, I guess. So each scene where him and the older woman are together should modify their relationship. It should advance it or move it back. And also, ideally, while the plot as well. You want to do two things at once at all time. That's probably something you already know. But the point is, don't just write scenes where people are hanging out and be like, unless you're writing a slice of life, unless we are literally just spending time with these characters, if you're telling a story, plot and characters are inexorably intertwined and need to happen at the same time. It sounds like I'm reading that from somewhere, but it's just words from my brain. Dots on the web novel. Boop, 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 boop. I'm not going to animate that. That's too much work. I would say 2 out of 5. It starts spectacularly, and even at the end of the first chapter, I said, okay, we're still going places here, but it immediately just falls off a cliff here where I don't even understand what, as a reader, I'm supposed to be enjoying, where the plot's going, what the systems and magic all mean. I don't know. I think it's interesting reading books because you can always tell the influences. Just like I know that Tamsin Lear secretly loves Kingdom Hearts, I'm fairly certain this author likes Chainsaw Man, which is fine. And another in terms of like writerisms you're told is like, oh, creativity is so important, newness, da-da-da-da-da. As a writer, you're going to be pulling from your influences. What judge you as a writer is your ability to transform them into something new and specifically something unique to you and your experiences. So it's not even a bad idea to have someone who's kind of like lonely and just tries to glomp onto women as a way to fill the emotional void in their soul. And when you take another person's personal message and you translate that poorly, that's when you get into the real trouble. That's when I look at it and say, oh, you're a creeper, because as much as I don't particularly like Chainsaw Man, it's not even the kind of thing I would normally watch, but people said, oh, it's crazy. I was like, oh, I like crazy. Crazy is what I like. Show me crazy. And it was just normal. It was just normal anime. Was there a dog? There was an anime dog. Is your dog like the anime dog? I don't think so. The writer had a point about male loneliness, and this writer doesn't have a point about male loneliness. They just saw it as a plot point that worked in another work and ripped it and said, there it is, see? Plot now. Anything I do talk about is going to have so much more meat than what I'm actually talking about here. So if you have questions, let me know. I will do follow-up topics on specific... I will certainly down the road do follow-up videos on specific topics. Because there's just certain things that would need a lot of depth and a lot of filling out. But otherwise, that's it. I will be seeing you around. More videos to come. You know what? Just screw it. I don't need an outro. I'm not one of these chimney prick bastard YouTubers.